Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off the screen share. I figure that's a good thing to have people look at while we're planning and getting started. And I will. You're probably seeing me now, which probably isn't the most pleasant thing, but that's okay. We'll kick it off. We'll kick it over to Rich later, and you can do a side-by-side comparison. So welcome everybody to our first the Labor Council's first Zoom session for the public, so to speak. Whether we've got a couple different plans with regards to panel discussions and speakers and workshops and whatever we can use this for. So we welcome you. We thank you for coming on. We had a total of about, I was told 27 people sign up for this. So we'll see, we might get some people coming in as we go along. If you find that your bandwidth, just some tech stuff off the top, if you find that your bandwidth is really straining to keep the video and audio, then by all means, you might have to turn your video off, or as the actual panel starts, if you don't want us to see what you're doing, you can certainly turn your video off as well. The idea, and I'm going to in a second paste the basic itinerary in the chat. If we change it as we go along, we may do that. So just to let you know, I'm going to mention just once again, if you wish to change your screen name, if you want to include your union or local or your pronouns, feel free to do that as well. If you don't know how to do that, message me in the chat and I can hopefully walk you through it. Or if you have an immediate question, you can do that. Once we get going later on, I will go over this once more, but I'll go over it now. There is an ability in Zoom to raise your hand if you want to talk or ask a question. Or the quicker thing will probably be just to, in the chat, type in the word question, and I'll try and keep track of that because I'll be the one who's kind of doing the background thing. Before we go any further, so my name is Anthony Marco. I'm the president of the Labor Council. I'd like to just do a very quick land acknowledgement. And I know that that's weird because we're hosting on a certain territory, but we're not necessarily everybody is jumping on the call from that territory as well. But the territory from which we are hosting on is the territory and unceded land of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe. And not only in these times, but in all times, we should always consider everything that we do on this land with a filter and with a lens towards truth and reconciliation. And that we make sure that we incorporate a lot of what we're seeing in our lives and a lot of what we see not only in the labor movement, but a lot of what we see with regards to our social justice activities, and make sure that we use the lens of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities as a lens that we focus on a constant basis and not just every time we get together at the beginning of a meeting. So I'd like to start with that. I'm going to introduce our moderator. He's a member of our executive, and many people around the Hamilton area know him. If you don't know him, you probably should. He's a delegate of SEIU Local 2. At this point, I'll kick it over to Rich Wyman to introduce our panelists and to get our topic going. Rich.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. This is first in what we hope from the Hamilton District Labor Council be sort of a series of web discussions. It's taken us a bit of time to get the technology up and running, but thanks to Anthony, we've now got sort of Zoom stuff ready to go. So we thought we would just sort of host a discussion on organizing when we're sort of banned from having big public events and things like that. It creates a lot of challenges, and we thought two people would be excellent from around the area, at least in Southern Ontario, would be Laxi, who works with SEIU Local 2, has done a lot of organizing in the Ottawa area, and now, fortunately, in the Toronto area, working out of the Local 2 office in Toronto, and Amna, who's working for ETFO, who was trained at SEIU Local 2. Sorry, I'm just bigging up my own local, who's done a lot of organizing, I believe, amongst ECEs, both who have had to sort of run drives and try to build committees and things like that, and helping workers form a union under the sort of new conditions we have. The hope what we'll do with this discussion is let both of them sort of speak for 10 minutes, and then open it up to the floor. As Anthony said, you can raise your hand, type in a question, and we'll have them come back at the end so that it allows more for discussion, because I know there's several people on this call that also do organizing and other things. So we would hope that they would sort of jump in the discussion as well with any ideas, suggestions, trying to figure out these new realities. And also, is this, does this open up possibilities if things ever get back to being able to do sort of face-to-face stuff on a more regular basis? Do any of the new sort of technologies and ways that Laxing and Almond have been using, do those open up sort of new possibilities, I guess, for the labor movement and workers to organize collectively to challenge their employers? So without listening to me babble on anymore, I'll turn it over. Maybe Laxi, do you want to kick it off? Is that okay?
Sure, works with me.
Awesome.
Hi, folks. I guess I'll start by talking about some of the challenges that I've been facing, doing some campaigns right now. I'm juggling maybe 3 campaigns, all active, which is great. One of them started after the lockdown. The other 2 they had started before, but most of the buildup has been now. So we're smack down in the middle of lockdown. I think one of the biggest challenges, or 3 of the biggest challenges that I've been dealing with, is a lot of apathy, the actual physical distance, and then shockingly a little bit of racism. Just because what I found is that when I was cold calling people that don't know what I look like, they don't know anything beyond my first name, they felt really, really open to kind of getting more vulnerable, in good in some ways, bad in other ways. So I dealt with a lot of anti-Black racism in terms of commentary about their own coworkers and their willingness or lack of willingness to want to organize and mobilize with each other. So trying to figure out how to mobilize people who had such segregated ideas of what it meant to be a team has been a big roadblock for me. And there's also security and trust issues, because when you're at their door and you door knock and say, hey, this is so-and-so from, well, okay, well, where did you get my number? Or how do you know me? Blah, blah, blah. It's easier to have this one-on-one in person where you can build that trust. On the phone, or suggesting you shoot them a text and say, hey, hop on a video call with me, is not the same at all. But there are perks to it as well, I've found over the last few weeks. One, in terms of time, a lot of people are juggling 2 to 3 jobs. They've got a life, kids to take care of. And sometimes when you're trying to say, hey, I think it's really important that we all meet at the same time, no one can do it. But I say, hey, all you need is your cell phone or your laptop or tablet or whatever. You can even do this while you're on break at work. I just want all of us to be on the same call at the same time for 15 minutes. People are able to commit to that a little bit better sometimes than having in-person meetings. I did get ghosted a couple of times. That wasn't so fun, sitting on Zoom, just kind of waiting around, just saying, okay, I know they'll come. They promised. And that is another challenge. When it's an in-person commitment, people are more likely to stick to it and show up, or you show up at their house, which is great, or their workplace, which means they're going to have that conversation with you. When it's on Zoom, it's a test though, so it kind of works in another way, because now you're being proven step 1 of commitment, right? They showed up to a Zoom, and especially if it's a group meeting on video, whether they turn their video on or not, their name does have to appear. I know we were chatting about the waiting room earlier with Anthony, but I do activate the waiting room option when I'm holding meetings with workers, because I want to ensure and tell workers that, this is a secure space, this is a safe space. No one but the people we've invited each other is allowed in. Last week, I had someone try to come in and their name was Samsung Android S9. And we're like, well, we're not letting you in unless you identify yourself. And that person was super anti-union. They're like, well, I'm not going to say. And we're like, well, tough nuggets, you're not getting in until you're going to be open to this conversation with your team. So that was a great preliminary test, which worked out, I guess. This is also tested to see what's accessible to workers in terms of like technology in terms of what people are aware of. So Zoom was something people were scared of. They're like, oh, do I have to pay for this? Do I have to download something? So far, it's been pretty accessible as long as I kind of explained what it meant. And I also would tell them that I would record the call and like provide them all the questions so they can review it afterwards, which was super helpful for folks. And then the second thing that I've been taking advantage of, and it's also one of my biggest tests right now, is to put people in a WhatsApp group once they've committed by signing a union card. And I always know when they're trying to flake or if they've got concerns or doubts, because they'll immediately leave the group. And then everyone else will jump on them and jump to me as well. And they'll be privately sending me messages going, what's happening? Why did this person leave the group? Are we okay? Or is this still good? And it really shows me who's very, very strong, who's a leader, who's going to take next steps. And I also realized that with this, more than in-person interactions, social distancing means having to work on leadership skills with everybody and not just identifying one leader. Having to task everyone seems to be more important because they really need to feel empowered in terms of not just passively signing a card and going, oh, I know the workplace leader's dealing with everything. I've done my part. I know I'm going to be in the union, but I don't want to do anymore, because list building is next to impossible right now, especially with the campaign that I started after the full lockdown. I don't know anything except what the one person told me about the workplace. I can't canvass the workplace, can't talk to anyone around in the neighborhood. Everyone's going to run from me, even if I was willing to take the risk. So, and it's not safe anyways, and I'm not about to go house hunting. So between all of that, I found that having to take some extra time to really drill into people empowerment stuff and leadership stuff has been necessary to get them to understand why they had to take action, why they would have to talk to a coworker. Because when it was in face, I never had to push as much for people. If people said, I don't want to tell anyone that I'm doing this right now, I would wait for the end stage of the campaign for it to push them to be like, no, we're all going to wear wristlets. We're all going to wear t-shirts. We're all going to show it together. But now it's more that I have to do that from the beginning, where I have to be like, no, if you want to be a part of this, you really have to be open about this. You really have to say loud and proud that you're going to unionize to your colleagues and not be afraid of it. So in a way, it's also challenging workers to look past their fears, which is tough because these are all essential workers that I'm working with. These are all people who are already so terrified because their bosses are bad bosses and they're doing terrible shit to them, and they're having to deal with that. Plus now I'm challenging them, saying, well, you have to be a little extra brave beyond taking all the health risks, beyond taking all the things that you're doing for next to nothing in terms of wages, and deal with it. I guess another thing though that I did realize though is that patience is a virtue, because I can't be chasing people down. It was really hard for me at first to not have to to show up at a house, just leave them a message and leave one message. You got to be really simple. If you overwhelm them with stuff, with calls, understanding that they are going through trauma right now, they're in a pandemic, but they're also frontline workers in a pandemic. So their level of experience is something that many of us may not be able to relate to. And that means that they're dealing with their kids, they're dealing with these job security issues and health, and then we're coming along. So I just have to give them that time to say, okay, I've talked to you, or I've left you a message, and now I have to sit back and wait. So that's been really, really tough in terms of assessing responses. It's because them taking more time doesn't mean that they're scared or they're going to back out. It just simply means that they have a lot of things going on, and that while I've stressed to them, pandemic is the perfect time to unionize, what other time than now for an essential worker to put pressure on your boss, because they need to see your worth now. If they didn't see it before, they should see it now. But getting workers angry when they're so terrified can be a task. It can be draining. So it's a challenge for sure. The thing is though, bad bosses continue to be bad bosses, and if anything, they're worse bosses right now. One of the campaigns I'm running, I know I just got a message from one of the workers that their boss actually gave them a pay cut of 15% during this time. Without asking them, they just said, okay, for the next 5 months, we expect you to show up to work, but we're taking 15% off your paycheck, because that's just how it works. But they're frontline workers. They're in a private medical facility that tests people for COVID. So if they're getting a pay cut, I don't know who deserves, I don't know who deserves more money at this point. But that is a good thing in the sense that bad bosses are absolutely terrible right now, which means people do have they have the flame. We just need to add the fuel to that. As long as we're eyes on the ground, we just got to keep out for these conversations. So instead of doing a lot of hardcore organizing, something else I've been doing while I wait for workers to get back to me is just to do little know your rights things. I just go, hey, we don't need to talk about the union right now, but I think you do need to know that Ontario has an emergency disease intervention. I forget what the bill is called, but basically that you have these rights. You're allowed to take time off without being fired, because workers are being threatened with losing their jobs if they're sick and cannot go. If they're caring for someone at home and cannot go, they're still being threatened. Their paychecks are still being cut. So as long as that stuff is happening and I make them wary of it, I get a thank you, and then I get a follow-up 2 days later going, now what can we do about forming a union, because clearly my boss sucks. So here we go, let's get this started. So I think I'll leave it at that. Maybe Amina, you want to say some stuff before I ramble on?
That was great, Laxi. Anthony, can you unmute Amina?
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that was awesome, Laxi. I think me and you have similar situations and some differences. Obviously, we work in different industries. So I work with DECEs, so early childhood educators, and we call them designated early childhood educators. And so I had a campaign that I've been working on slowly, and most of my campaign method is face-to-face, similar to Laxi. We do the exact same thing. I like to be in the field, and that's the way I find success in getting people to sign cards, is through visiting them at a Tim Hortons or a restaurant. I try to keep the meetings smaller. I find smaller meetings are more effective. And I am working with public sector workers. So sometimes people think private sector organizing is very different from public sector organizing. I've learned that it's not necessarily. The demographic that I work with are non-members that work 2 jobs. Some of them are ECEs in a YMCA. Some of them are bartenders. Some of them are, babysitters or doing other work, care work, predominantly in the care economy. There are also a lot of mothers, single mothers. It's a highly woman workforce, and I think that's why it has been systematically sort of de-skilled and sort of paid less. So they're not members that you would think, have one job. It's not like that. So like I said, they're very busy as well, similar to Laxi. I think the big difference between the members that I deal with is they have some privileges like computer literacy. So transitioning my campaign online, which I'll talk about, was a bit easier for me because a lot of our members already do a lot of things online. And with distance learning that is coming through the government, they had to download Zoom. They had to, be aware of these different tools to do this type of learning. So they were getting prepared for that regardless. And I think most educators have iPads in the classroom, have access to those tools. So that's a benefit I had. But basically before COVID, I didn't really do much online. I wasn't a big Facebook, like in my personal life, I do all that stuff, but with organizing, I never go on Facebook, post things like about meetings. I do most of my campaigning through, I'll send an email and I'll do phone banking for me to turnout to a meeting. But I definitely wasn't using Facebook and all these tools pre-COVID. But just to move it along, when COVID happened in April, I had just come back from doing some Bernie Sanders canvassing. I was like moving my campaign kind of slowly, deliberately. I just organized a big group of teaching assistants. We call them ESPs. So I was kind of like chilling out about it. And then COVID happened. I was sent to quarantine at home and clean out my office. And I really thought my campaign was dead. I didn't think, I was like, okay, I'm gonna wait this out. I think that this should finish in a week or two. I guess I was wrong, but so I started posting, like Laxi was saying, I would just post like, I created a Facebook account, like an anonymous Facebook account, like not anonymous, but like a tamed Facebook account of me. And then I started posting about CERB, rent strikes, mortgage deferrals in the DECE group. And I noticed right away the amount of interaction I was getting. Like it was more than I got in the whole year. So what I mean by that, there were people that never signed a union card with me. And I had been calling them through the year being like, where are you? I had mailed them cards. I'd put cards in there. Like I did everything to get a card to them. And it wasn't happening. But now COVID happened, bam, everybody's like messaging me. People are like sending me heart emojis. People are like, hey, you know, I've been trying to get back to you. And I was like, no, you're not, no, you haven't. But it was great. And I think that's when I realized, I was like, oh, I have to file. Like, I'm gonna have to file. Like I need a few more cards, but I didn't have an electronic card at that point either, but I realized I need to file. So I need to start doing Zooms. And the first Zoom I did, I had amazing turnout. For me, it was a learning curve. I don't know everything. I feel like in organizing, we have some benefits, like people are really kind to us and like kind to the organizer. That's what I find. I see Rich's face and he's like, no. But I found people were really kind to me, and I was like, I didn't know how to use the Zoom perfectly. I feel as an organizer, you don't have all the time to do everything perfectly. You have to follow the momentum of the campaign. And the campaign was telling me, and the organizing committee was telling me that they wanted to file. And so our Zooms were good. And then what we would do is after our Zoom, we would do an organizing committee. We joined a WhatsApp group, like Laxi similarly was saying. And I found that that's really good for the organizing committee because they can talk back and forth. Definitely there were challenges. Like I said, you know, DECEs are afraid. You know, they've never been in a union, some of them. So maybe they work in two boards and they're not in the union at any board. They might have seen a union drive in the private sector at the YMCA. They saw it squashed. They're afraid for, you know, like anybody else. They don't want to cause problems at work. They don't want to have a problem with the principal, right? They want to have a good relationship. They want to get jobs. So, and this group again is part-time. They're also part-time. So I think that there's challenges because there's fear. Like some people told me that they didn't want to come on the Zoom. Like they felt, but like, you know, and you could tell that they're afraid. I also think some people, yeah, like you could tell they were afraid. An organizer can tell they're afraid. Or the other thing that I think is another challenge is many of them were working two jobs. You know, they're moms, they're looking after their family. And I think I didn't realize, I think later on in the campaign, when I was kind of getting like, why aren't you turning up on the call? This is really important. Where are you? Then people told me, like, I'm in India, like I've been stuck in India, or my husband is unwell, you know, I think we have COVID, you know, and then I came to that reality that, okay, this is like, people are really dealing with stuff and they care about the union, and they said they will vote yes. we got to a vote and we won the vote. It was successful. We didn't really have an anti-campaign. That being said, there are anti-campaigns too, but here we didn't. And I think it was because we filed really quickly and the employer was kind of busy with preparing for distance learning and all the changes and the laws were constantly changing. So I think that they were just so busy. And yeah, and I think these online tools are great. I do think people are still afraid. So people think that they're being spammed. They've told me that they're scared and they didn't know it was me. So it's like you kind of have to call people more than once, I find, and be like, hey, it's me. Or what I did actually to overcome some of that fear is like I would ID somebody from the same language group or the same background and get them to call and be like, hey, you know, like, so building, like Laxi said, building leaders, stronger leaders, and a stronger organizing committee that takes on tasks. I mean, don't overtask them, but if they can make calls, the calls are more effective than I think the Zoom. I think the Zoom is more of a test to see if people would show up and be more open. But yeah, and that's, I think I just learned something from Laxi about putting them in the waiting room, which I might try that for my next meetings. I'm basically moving on to another campaign and that's about it.
That was great, Amina. Thank you so much, and thanks to Laxi. Does anybody have? I see some people that are doing organizing right now. Maybe people want to jump in. I know Jesse, you're doing stuff with healthcare workers, and Minna, I don't know you, but I see that it says RA organizing. I'm assuming at Wilfrid Laurier. So I don't know if there's other people that want to jump in on this discussion and sort of talk about their experiences a little bit as well. Jesse?
Yeah, hey guys, that was really super helpful and interesting to listen to. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Okay, cool. So thanks to the panelists, that was really great, and thanks for doing this and bringing us all together while we're all isolated. Just a couple quick thoughts and then a question for anyone who wants to answer. So because I do healthcare organizing and we do a lot of home care organizing, a lot of these things we've had to leverage in the past already, like WhatsApp groups, Facebook groups, because home care, there is no bricks and mortar workplace, right? You are trying to find people in the community. Maybe one PSW or one nurse knows like one or two other people, and then you kind of build your list out from there. So we've kind of leveraged that stuff in the past. However, like what I'm being tasked with right now in my organizing is, and I'm struggling with it, is like trying to probe targeted workplace. So for instance, there are a bunch of non-union long-term care homes who have been hit hard by COVID, as an example. And so my employer, Local 1 or SEIU Healthcare, wants to target some of those long-term care homes for organizing drives. Now, if it was like, if we could not socially distance, I could maybe go to a bus stop and like leaflet someone or probe or do something, right? But like I'm online, so I've been able to list build by being a creep on Facebook. But I'm wondering if folks have any insight or suggestions or maybe something they found successful. I know we're still kind of relatively new in this pandemic, so I don't know if anyone's launched a campaign from scratch with no leads yet. And I don't know who else is out there doing that, but I'm essentially being tasked to like create a campaign from nothing and not come off like a Facebook stalker or an internet creep or like a stock account or a spam account, right? So, you know, we have this hotline for non-union workers, and ads we're pushing that are geo-targeted, you know, say call this hotline if you know, need help with WSIB or whatever the issue is, right? But it's not, I mean, I've heard some other cool stuff from like what the Foodsters did or like what IATSE's doing with their animators campaign, where they like put out like through like a third party, like kind of what Local 2 is doing too. The unions are essential page, where it's not explicitly like, you know, this union wants you to form a union. It's like, hey, this broader issue-based kind of conversation. And what I knew Foodsters or Cup W did with Foodsters was like push a survey, like, you know, how often you have to, you know, do maintenance on your bike, and then people would respond to that, and then you'd follow up with a lead based on that response from that survey. as one example of maybe how to do this, but I'm really curious because I'm banging my head against the wall. Does anyone have any suggestions or thoughts on this, like creating leads or identifying leaders from scratch and targeted campaigns purely from like a socially distanced online space? Sorry, that was a long preamble, but that's my question.
That's great. There is a question for people doing organizing right now from, I just saw it in the chat room, from Sazana Miranda, asking how did people do databasing with no physical workplace? So how, you know, how do you build lists? How do you map workplaces? How do you do, like, and what do you do with wall charts when you don't have an office? Would be my question. For those that have done organizing, lots of wall charting, trying to map out workplaces. So
yeah,
if
your
you live in a small,
your partners hate you because your kitchen becomes your office. That's basically the answer to that. Yeah.
so I don't know if people, if there's other questions, or if people want to just Amina, Laxi, if you want to jump in and just maybe take that question on.
Yeah, I can take on the question in terms of database. When I filed for the vote, I was given a list from the employer that had about like 70 new people. And that was challenging because I didn't know who they were. And, you know, some of the organizing committee, they don't know who they are. They go to schools every single day. They might never cross another supply. They cross permanent members, or they cross like other teachers, but they'll never cross another DCE supply. So they may not know them. So I really had to, I brought the charts home. I learned through visually. I feel like I can't read the Excels that well. And plus I didn't have, you know, like a big screen to look at and whatever, but I charted name by name. And I went through the list name by name with our organizing committee, and we sort of searched everybody on Facebook and tried to add them to the group. And most people were fine with it. I think though, there are other community groups. Sometimes if you do research, just to connect it to what Jesse's saying, there are like local community groups. And like, for example, where I live, I've learned like I could map out my own community. Like I live in an area, there's all these like different community groups, bicycle groups, running groups. And there's a lot of different people in there. And there's people who are posting, I've noticed since COVID, that I'm an essential worker. Like, hi, I bake lasagna, and like, you know, like people are posting all sorts of things in these tiny community groups. So I think doing more research locally, like my mom lives near Altamont, and the Altamont long-term care home, but like even her little community where she lives, like there are like all these different community groups and mutual aid happening, and I think they're all on Facebook, and you could look it up.
And then maybe to add on to what Amina was saying, and it also addresses something that Jesse was asking. Amina had earlier mentioned that she had a separate Facebook account where she started posting and concentrating on like rent and COVID and CERB and stuff. And maybe you don't want to use your own account, but people do respond in these like care community groups to personal accounts. When they see that it's kind of like a targeted ad group, they're not as receptive. But if you're going and going, hey, I'm a whole person, these are all the things that I care about right now, you'll notice that people respond to you as well. So people have been more receptive. In terms of getting cold leads like that, that's also, I think maybe Jesse and I talked about this earlier, about how I've used my own like Instagram or Facebook stories where I won't talk about unions. I'll just say, hey, well, actually sometimes I'll just drop a question, say, who here works in a unionized space? And, or what's your work experience like? How are you finding it? And people always want to talk. That's what I've learned. You just have to ask the right questions. And when you do, there's always like for every 10 people that respond with problems or issues at their workplace, there's like 3 that have good leads that I can build on or pass on to someone else if it's not really fitting within my scope. But that's been really helpful. And with the database stuff, it's definitely not easy, but like Amina said, community groups are helpful, but also just getting our workers, like right now, I know that in the private medical group, that I'm working with, they don't know each other like in different locations at all. So the only way I can get them, get the contact information is I'm telling them, hey, like I can try and figure it out, but the faster way would be for you to contact them, because there is a database somewhere with a list of all their names and all their phone numbers. So I'm kind of getting them to do some of the actual organizing work, because I'm like, you know it's there, you just have to find it. Maybe you've never seen this list before, but it's time that you find this list. So I have tasked people with actually getting me physical lists or Excel sheet versions of it, and they're actually agreeing to it. I had it was funny, there's this other like it's like a storage company that I'm working with, and it's like got like 70 locations. I can't obviously get to any of them right now, and the first maybe 30 workers I talked to did not know, and they were all young people who were tech savvy. They were like, no, I don't know what this is about. They were so hesitant, didn't want to tell me how, like, because none of them knew each other, they never went to other locations, they only know one other person that they work with. And then finally I met the 72-year-old, and she's like, oh, don't worry, there's a list here, come around the shop, print out the whole list for you. So every workplace has those lists. We just have to convince our workers that it's okay to find them and pass it on to us. So that works sometimes.
Yeah, I would agree. I didn't have a list like for my last vote. We had to build the list. I didn't mention that. An employer would, like, we couldn't get the list because of that Bill 148, that part of getting lists or something was scrapped. So we built the list, and then we had 70 more people when we filed for the vote added onto the list. So we built it and researched and mined, and I don't know, people find the names. They always say they don't know, but then someone knows.
Yeah.
So thanks. Those are great answers. I've got a question, and then there's Tanya. Tanya's iPhone. I don't know who. It's a great last name, iPhone.
Tanya Ferguson.
I'm just joking. Sorry, Tanya Ferguson. Has a question about, I think for Jesse, it's like, can you use clients or families to get an understanding of those sorts of workplaces? Which I think is a good question. And, how do you go about doing that? And can you go about doing it? And then I had a question about, like, how do you like change your, like, if people have been doing organizing, I know Amina and Laxi and Jesse, we come all out of the same sort of school of training, I assume, where there's a heavy emphasis on like visiting workers at home rather than at the workplace, just because people are more open to discussing things at their house than they are if they're, in case, in the workplace where their boss or a rat or somebody else may go cruising past them. So like, how do you, like for me, the idea of trying to do cold calls over the phone or by email, it's like, I'd almost rather risk getting COVID by going and banging on doors. So I'm just wondering, like, how do you change that, like, rather elaborate and somewhat sophisticated, method of doing house visits or face-to-face visits in a coffee shop, where you're doing that agitation to try to identify issues, to try to, get the anger to overcome the fear of forming a union, all that sort of stuff. How do you morph that into, phone, Zoom, that sort of stuff? So I'll stop rambling there, but I'd be interested to hear what you guys say, and Jesse, about the question of Tanya's phone. And sorry, one more question. Sadeh has apologies if I mispronounced that, has her hand up. So do you want?
Hi, can you hear me? Hello. I really didn't have a question, but I just wanted to comment. I am representing Niagara Labor Council. Oh, sorry. Hi, you still there? Niagara Labor Council. So thank you for the open dialogue here. I just wanted to say that the activism that I'm hearing from our sisters in Hamilton is truly inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing everything you're doing. It's amazing. I will certainly relay that back to our region in Niagara. I think personally, we're struggling right now in my area with supporting our non-unionized migrant workers who are supporting us in a very essential way in securing the safety of our food supply. And I'm finding it challenging trying to galvanize support for their plight, to safeguard their rights as workers who are currently here residing with us and doing such important work. So I would love to hear your thoughts about how we can get our communities more interested and involved in this struggle. Thanks.
That's great. Do you guys want to come back on the couple questions that were posed?
Sure. All right, so are we circling back to your question, Rich, first about the, all right, just because that's at the top of my head, I guess. In terms of dialogue and wraps, a lot actually hasn't changed for me in terms of how I approach phone calls or video chats. I actually have my handy little thing at the back. I don't know if you can see it, but basically it goes over the legal requirements to organize the 40% blah, blah, blah. And then on the other side, we've got the boss fight and the whatever, but it's not a lot, but it's kind of just an engaging little thing. So when I've got everyone's attention, they don't want to see my face all day. And I just kind of pull up the camera to that and I say, hey, let's talk about this. But in terms of actually cold calling workers, I just find that I have to dial up the energy 100,000 times and just be like, hey, I'm here to listen. All I want to know is what the hell's going on with your day at work, because I hear it sucks. And then you've got like, you know, the very hesitant or the anti sort of being like, no, work's great, like it's fine. And I'm like, you know what? That's fantastic. I'm so glad that you're able to work in a safe place during COVID. And then they're like, well, it's not that great. And then they'll just open up. In fact, I think some of the facelessness almost helps them open up sometimes. So there is perks to it. So yeah, my rap hasn't changed that much in terms of how I agitate them. The phone calls last easily anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours, depending, and then build off from that. So as long as my phone is charged, I'm good.
Jesse, either of you guys want to jump in on those questions?
I think the cold calling, yeah, it is hard. They're like, who are you? Even I do hustle texts. I send texts through hustle. Some people are like, I have no idea who you are. Like they'll send me, I have no idea who you are, right? You're texting me a lot. So what happens is I ID those people. And then I go back to the committee and I'm like, does anybody know this person? Because they don't believe what I'm saying. So we've had to call those people like 2-3 times and then they're fine. And then they get it. And then they come on the Zoom. It's pretty kind of amazing when the organizing committee steps up and calls. It's because they're hearing from another worker, who does the exact same thing as them, rather than sometimes the staff. I'm an outsider, right? And they don't really know who I am. But I think that there has been people who asked me to drop off things like when COVID started, and I tried to use my judgment to not do that right now. I don't know what's going to happen over the next months, but it does seem to me, I'm just saying, I'm not saying I'm going to do it because I don't want people shaming me from all over the internet about social distancing, but it does seem to me that people, like workers, have asked me to drop off things, like put it in a bag. I don't know if Delaxi has the same thing, put it in the mailbox. And they're saying that because it's really important to them. Like, organizing and forming a union and all this information is really important to them. So if this keeps continuing, I don't know if we're going to have to do everything online. I think that we're just going to have to, as organizers, become creative and make sure we implement like health and safety that assures that we're okay and that the workers feel good about it. Because I didn't instigate, like, do you want me to drop something off? But they've asked me. They're like, can you put it in my mailbox? So I'm just saying, maybe down the months, if this continues, I don't know if standing on someone's grass, like, will that be possible? I think it will be possible. I'm just saying that because I think that they're okay with it and they're comfortable with it. And then that will be great for us, basically, too, right?
Jesse, did you want to respond to the question about client, like potentially trying to use clients and families to get a better understanding or mapping sort of workplaces that you're going after?
Yeah, just quickly. I mean, I think it's the same challenge, right? It's different when you have a lead, someone reaches out to you and they call the union and say, hey, I want to start a union, or they send you an email or whatever. Like, and then you can build, they might not be, on your committee, but they can help you ID leaders. The same thing kind of goes with like clients or residents or family, right? Like it's like, for me, I'm grappling with how do you probe and begin a campaign without a lead or without knowing the residents or without knowing the families. So the same problem kind of presents itself, whether it's mapping through the families or the residents or mapping through the workers. It's still finding those people and then finding a hook. Like, what is the hook to get someone to not think you're an internet stalker who just like, for instance, the places I'm probing are like many hundreds of kilometers away from where I live, right? And the list building I've had to do, like, I'm going through like another city's, social networks, and I'm finding people's names and where they work. And so it's really strange. Like, hey, I'm Jesse from Oshawa. I noticed you work at this retirement home that has a COVID outbreak. You want to like have a phone conversation? Like, obviously that's not going to work. Most people won't go for that. So, I mean, I hear that. I think the residents and the clients and the families and stuff are really powerful, like leverage points in contract negotiations and those types of things. Because you can kind of bring together that community. But when you're trying to start a campaign, I'm not sure if that's always, I'm not saying never, but I just don't know if that's the most strategic way to go about generating a lead. So it's still, I mean, I'm struggling with it. I still think from other organizers I've spoken to, it's like these push surveys that like are targeted, that like ask workers to give up some information, or whether it's a lost work survey or working conditions survey or whatever it is, and then following back up with them like, hey, you filled out the survey, you said this, this, and this. I'm an organizer at SEIU. How you doing? Might be more effective. But just also really quickly, it was mentioned about actually going back to meeting with workers again. And I also want to remind all the organizers on this call that we're also workers, and that our employers should be getting us proper PPE and making sure that we're also safe at work. Because that's also another issue that we initially, when this first hit, we were dealing with this. And I mean, I don't know who's on this call. I can see the participants, but I don't know if I get disciplined for this. I'm a steward, so whatever. But we were being asked to, yeah, there we go. We got only rank and file here, right? We were being asked to meet in Tim Hortons still the day that Tim Hortons shut its dining rooms, right? And I was like, why is Tim Hortons ahead of the curve more than we are? So it's just, these are things we're going to have to grapple with, because we have to meet with workers eventually. COVID's not going away right now. We got to figure out a way to meet with people, and we just got to figure out how to stay safe and do it, keep workers safe and still win, right? So anyway, I could ramble on forever, but I won't, and I'll stop now.
There's Anthony's and Barry have questions, but Laxi, were you raising your hand, or were you just doing like a Zoom exercise sort of? Okay. So the question, there's questions on the chat from Barry, which is asking a question about hustle, which I think is good, because there's all kinds of technologies that people are trying to use. And then from Anthony asking if there's any tools or techniques, things that we're using right now, that you guys are using right now, that will be useful or helpful to sort of, that we can build upon to sort of help strengthen organizing drives, or, maybe organize new areas of workers and things like that. So we'll go across, maybe start with Amina, and then Laxi, and then Jesse, if you want to jump in as well.
Well, in the case of Jesse, I think I don't know, but like maybe still like looking at like what people are doing with the rent strike, with mutual aid, community organizing. People are being really creative and doing postering everywhere. And I think that's a way, like if you have a Google, whatever, and then people email you, and then I think that's how people are collecting information for the rent strike. I don't know if anybody else knows about that, but if you could poster in the area, there's posters everywhere about everything wherever I go outside, and I feel like they're really noticeable. So I don't know, that's just a suggestion of mine.
Laxi, do you want to?
Well, an add-on to that, to what Amina said for Jesse, I think something I would think about is maybe reaching out to, I know that a lot of PSWs that work in long-term care homes also do like one-on-one residence watches at hospitals and stuff. So maybe they have friends in hospitals with workers who are unionized. So maybe touching base with stewards from other fellow unions that have hospital workers, nurses, whatever, I think would be a great way to get to the PSWs at hospitals that also work at long-term care homes, because they would definitely have some crossover there. I know my mom's done that a lot before, and they all become friends very quickly. So there's some information there. You just got to talk to the right people, I think. If we're gonna jump on to the hustle question, Hustle's a little different from WhatsApp or Signal or anything, just because it is technically a web-based program in terms of the person initiating the conversation, but not so much for the person receiving the text. So it's called like a peer-to-peer conversation or peer-to-peer text message, but the person initiating it has a whole administrative page where you can upload up to, I think it's like 100,000 contacts. I think it was most famously and first popularly used by the NDP, and then it was adopted by other union groups and stuff. It's really, really handy. I also use it a lot when I do like get out the vote and stuff. What you're doing is you're uploading all your contacts, whether it's for internal organizing for existing members, once you've built your list and you've made a bunch, like you've gotten most of your contacts down, like getting out the vote, then you can have like a very like specific script that you can mass send to everyone, but it goes out from like a random number that's not yours, and they receive it as an actual text message. And what that means is that anyone who doesn't have internet access, so in terms of accessibility, it is great for the worker because they can get back to you via text, and they can actually hit call on that number that they receive the text from, and they do get it. They can reach back to you. So you can set it up to be your cell phone that receives the call, sorry, or like a basic landline. Like we do that for even events. So if we've got like our annual picnic and we want to invite all 3,000 of our members, and we know that some of them are just better at calling and asking about it instead of texting back their RSVP, we'll set it up so that it all goes to voicemail on our office message over the weekend. We'll send them all out on a Friday. We get all of our RSVPs by Monday by text or by call, and then we can kind of sort it out, versus like having to mail out things for, I don't know, 3,000 members, or having to text or call 3,000 people individually. It is not free, but I think from the cost that it comes to, it's pretty worth it. The last time I checked, I know things have changed a bit, but I think it was 23 cents a contact. So not a text, but per contact. So 23 cents per month per contact. So no matter how many times you're interacting with them, that's a pretty good number when you look at it. And the analytics of the software does talk to you like about engagement, how many different new people are engaging with you. You can add like tags onto people as you kind of get to know them, like, oh, these people are French, these people are anti-union. You can add these tags, so when you want to refocus a new message to a particular group based on language or whatever, or people who are activists or interested in participating in future events, you can just target that within the mass group that you uploaded. So it becomes more and more useful the more you use it. And I also wanted to go back to Shide's question about the migrant workers in Niagara. That really, really sucks, and I do feel for you. I think something that I was seeing around in my neighborhood anyways, especially with social distancing, is getting folks to do a lot of like lawn signs to kind of get them to engage without actually having to do a lot of like physically close talking. So leafletting them to be like, would you like to put a sign that supports migrant workers or gets the attention towards a specific campaign? And like my neighborhood's like chock full of like specific messages to specific essential workers and things like that, or practicing social distancing and whatnot. But yeah, I'll stop there.
That's awesome, everybody. We've got like 1 or 2 minutes left. We're trying to keep these at an hour long. So is there any last super salient points that any of the speakers wanted to make? Well, I just want to, okay, that's great. I just want to thank everyone for participating in this. Sorry, I running around trying to get the kittens to stop eating things. And thanks to everybody for calling in. I do know we will be doing more of these sorts of forums, discussions on different issues. I think we're doing one coming up on like mapping neighborhoods. So actually trying to use these new technologies, not necessarily for organizing unions, but for doing community style organizing, mutual aid stuff. Anthony, what are some of the other workshops we're sort of?
Yeah, so just in terms of starting to do the wrap, let me first of all, I'm going to echo a bit of what Rich said. Thank you, Laxi. Thanks, Amina, for chipping in. Thanks everybody for coming on and giving an hour of your time to talk about workplace organizing in the middle of this pandemic. And we've seen how what a great opportunity that this can be if we want to make it that. And thanks, Rich, for moderating. That's been great as well. Next Thursday, if you happen to be from Hamilton, or you know people in Hamilton, we have another scheduled event next week, which is a virtual town hall. So the mayor of Hamilton has started up an economic recovery task force and mostly invited a whole bunch of business people and chambers of commerce and a whole bunch of different sectors of the corporate world. We had to push, and we did get a seat for the Labor Council on there as well. But in putting the terms of reference for that task force together, they did not include any equity lenses whatsoever. Almost anything with regards to trying to represent even some of the equity committees that they have tied into the city. So one of the tasks that we've taken on as a Labor Council is trying to realize the fact that if we're representing the working class, we have to recognize the intersectionality of that working class and try and get as much input as possible from as many different groups as we can. So next Thursday, if you're from Hamilton or you know people from Hamilton, Thursday, 7 p.m., we're going to have the town hall, and we're going to be sharing that on our Facebook page as well. Same as this, asking one question: as we come out of this post-pandemic economy, what are your biggest concerns as a worker going forward? And if we can start to put some of that data together, that's what we're going to take to the task force. So, Rich, I don't know if you have any concluding thoughts other than that, but.
No, I think this was a great start for our sort of attempts at finding ways to discuss what working class people do, how we organize them, how we get through this crisis, because I don't think this is going to be the end of it. We're going to see more of these sorts of things happen to us, unfortunately. So I think it's a great start. Thanks to everybody for coming out. And check the District Labor Council Facebook site, website for updates on all of this stuff. And Jesse, I know you said you wanted to try to keep meeting with some other organizers. I guess keep going. I know Amina has been pulling some people together to try to discuss how organizers from different unions are grappling with this, moving things forward, dealing with the new stuff at the labor board. So I think that's a great idea if people sort of, from different unions are sharing sort of different information, because I hope coming out of this crisis, there's going to be renewed interest in sort of collective workplace organizing to challenge the employers as they try to, I think, ramp up austerity to take this back out on our hides. So thanks everybody for coming out, and look forward to hopefully seeing some of you at other discussions, and check out the District Labor Council Facebook site for upcoming stuff. Thanks, Laxi. Thanks, Amina. Thanks, Jesse. Thanks, everybody else. And thanks, Anthony, for hosting this and doing the tech end in your podcast room there. That's awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Bye.